Hey there everybody, Scotia here with once again another Street Fighter 6 video, though I promise this is the last one I will be doing before we eventually see the game again, sometime this summer. We don't actually know when we're going to see it again. But this is the last topic I kind of actually wanted to cover in terms of what I want from Street Fighter 6. I've gone in depth multiple times now about the roster and the characters and who I would like to see and who I wouldn't want to see. But for this video, as you can no doubt tell, I'm going to be talking about the game itself and what I feel like it really needs to do. And I'm going to be talking here from a viewpoint of somebody in 2022 who spent the last 6 years of Street Fighter 5. I was there day one when it came out in 2016, and I'm just going to be talking about the things that Capcom could improve on, the things they could change, the things they could bring back with a new twist, and the things I think that they can do to just make Street Fighter 6 the best game it can be and a product that's going to satisfy everybody. So here are 5 things that I feel like Street Fighter 6 must do. So number 1 is one that I feel like a lot of people A, have wanted for quite a long time now, and B, one I think you'll be able to guess pretty easily if you've seen this channel for any period of time. If you've been here, if you've watched any of my other videos on Street Fighter or Street Fighter 6, you'll know that this one is very important to me, and it's one that I'm very much desperately hoping happens, and that is, I think the game desperately needs to be set after Street Fighter 3 in the timeline. As I'm sure many of you already know, and for those that don't know, I'm going to explain it, but Street Fighter 3 has always been the end point of the series since pretty much its inception. You know, it has always been the end point. When we look at Street Fighter's timeline as a whole, Street Fighter 3 has always been at the end. It's just been that way for years, and we're so used to it now, and we're also so used to Capcom just dancing around that game and the events of that game and just kind of almost refusing to just move past it, and kind of just ripping off that band-aid and just going like, you know what, we're just going to go for it, we're just going to move the series past it. And they've always just really tried the hardest to not do that. I mean, ever since Street Fighter 4 and the resurgence of the series back into the limelight, and then eventually followed up by Street Fighter 5, they've always kind of just had this way of being like, the game is always just set before Street Fighter 3, or the game is set like a couple of years before, and then this game is the bridge between the events of this game, and then, you know, Street Fighter 5 was specifically advertised as the bridge that links Street Fighter 3 to the rest of the series, specifically Street Fighter 4. They were at E3, I think in 2016, promoting the cinematic story mode at the time. And they specifically said, the Capcom reps at E3 specifically said that Street Fighter 5 was the bridge between Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter 3. So they've always kind of been leading towards it, but especially in the early days of Street Fighter 4, it was very much this thing of like, we're just not going to touch Street Fighter 3. Like, we're not going near it, we're not moving past it. And even then, you've even had fans be like, oh, Street Fighter 3 should just be retconned. And it's like, I'm not going to get into that because that is just a whole... Oh, that's a whole video rant I could do on my own, the people who think Street Fighter 3 should just be retconned. But it's always been something that is just, it's been there. Street Fighter 3 has been there. The events of it have just, it's never been moved on from. We've never had the conclusions to any of the storylines that were left open in that game. We've never seen Alex kind of continue to grow. We've never seen his more confrontations with him versus the Illuminati and Gil. We've never seen Sean, you know, properly be trained by Ken. We've never seen, you know, Oro, you know, kind of like watch Ryu train from far and eventually maybe even train him. And it's just, there's lots of storylines that we've just never kind of, we've all had them be built to, but we've never had them move past. And I really hope this is the game that does it. And the list I'm using here, I guess you could call it a script that I'm using to kind of like make points of that I'm going to talk about in this video. I originally wrote this list of things of what I wanted in Street Fighter 6. I wrote this like a year or so ago, and at the time we actually didn't know certain things about Street Fighter 5 story, and I've done a video on this in the past if you want to hear about it in more detail. But we know now that Street Fighter 5 has elements that take place both during and after Street Fighter 3, and that's just crazy to me. I said in the video, like, it's insane for 2 reasons. It's insane that they actually went past Street Fighter 3, and it's insane that they revealed this in tweets from the director. It's the most Capcom way of doing it, but I digress. And now that we know that, and now that this is a thing, we know that Capcom have actually dipped their toe in Street Fighter 3 story, although very vaguely and not in any way direct. You know, you wouldn't know they've got into Street Fighter 3 story or territory in the timeline unless you read the tweets and like knew about it. But it's good to know that like they're willing to do it, And so this point I'm not as worried about as I was when I wrote this a year or so ago. I'm now more confident than ever, and I'm pretty sure I said this in the Street Fighter 6 video I did when the game got revealed, and kind of like I talked about it very briefly there. But I'm more confident than ever that this is going to be the game that moves us past Street Fighter 3 in the timeline. And of course, there's always the chance Capcom, debate us and screw us over, and it's set 5 minutes before Third Strike or some shit like that. It's always possible they could do it. But I'm fairly sure Capcom, the team that are now in charge of Capcom, Takayuki Nakayama and the other guy whose name I have just completely blanked on. I'm so sorry to that guy. I'm going to have his name on the screen now. The team that are in charge now, they're very clearly fans of the entire series of all of Capcom's games, fighting games or otherwise. You can tell they're very much fans of it. And I do feel like, and I know this might sound rude or whatever, but I definitely think with Ono gone, we now actually have a decent chance of just having more nods, more kind of things here and there that could definitely point us to the direction of just moving past Street Fighter 3, clearing it and just moving on. Like I was going to say moving on with our lives, which is kind of true, honestly. I mean, it's been 23 years since Third Strike came out, and Third Strike has been that final point in the series for so long. Obviously Street Fighter 3 being the final point and Third Strike being the final game of the Street Fighter 3 series chronologically, and both in terms of the games themselves. And man, it's just been so long now. It's been so long in the making. I mean, I'm sure people who play Street Fighter 5 now, or even Street Fighter 4, probably weren't even alive, when Third Strike came out and we reached the end of that series. Like, so many new fighting games, so many things have changed both in the series and in real life, in the fighting game community, in the fighting game scene, in the development of so many fighting games. Like, series have come and crumbled and grown, and so many things have changed now. It's just like we've still never gone past it. But like I said, I'm very confident. I'm very interested in it. I said briefly again in the Street Fighter 6 video that I think one of the biggest signs that Street Fighter 6 is definitely going to move past it is the designs of Ryu and Luke, and kind of Ryu less so, because I mean, a beard's a beard. It doesn't take that long to grow a beard, probably a few months, if you're quite lucky in being able to grow one that size. But I wouldn't use facial hair as a good sign of being able to tell how much time has passed. But with Luke, I think it's easy to see more with Luke how long it's been. Obviously, I can't pinpoint a certain time frame. It could be months, it could be years. We'll find out when we play the game or when Capcom say so. But for me, the fact that Luke has so many scars and his design in general has changed. He does look a bit older, but again, that could just be the change in art style. To me, it looks like since Street Fighter 5, Luke has been traveling the world as a Street Fighter, getting into fights, winning fights, losing fights. So to me, it definitely seems like time has passed. And if in Street Fighter 5 we were at the point where we were in Street Fighter 3 itself, then I think we're very likely to move past Street Fighter 3 officially. Like, to me, like, just having a Street Fighter game like from the start take place after 3 would just be insane. Like, I honestly I couldn't even fathom it at the moment. But I think this is going to be the game. I'm very excited. But if it's not, if Capcom don't do this, I'm going to be so mad. You don't even know how angry I'm going to be. I'm so tired of it. I so desperately want to see these things move on. I want to see these characters grow. I want to see, a Sean who can fight better, who can actually train under Ken and learn those moves, learn Atsatsuken moves officially and not just by watching him. I want to see Ryu grow and maybe train under Oro. I want to see Alex grow as a person and clash more with Gil and Yuri. Just so many things I want to see, and it's like, if they don't do it, I'll be so disappointed. It will really, really affect how I view Street Fighter 6 as a whole. But hopefully it doesn't come to that. But yeah, that's absolutely number one on my list. It needs to happen. Absolutely needs to happen. For number 2, I feel like this is one that people are going to feel very strongly about, especially if you were there for Street Fighter V's launch, and that is, the game needs to have basic game modes in it day one. Street Fighter 5, when it came out in 2016, was shit. It just was. There's no point in denying it. You know it, I know it, the whole world knows that the game was just not great at launch. And a big part of that, I feel, and I know quite a lot of people felt at the time, was that there just wasn't a lot to do in Street Fighter 5 when it came out. You had the character stories, which at the time there were only 16 of, and some were very short. You had the survival mode, which was just torturous to do it at that period in time. You had the trials, which, are trials. There's not really a lot of, fun you can have from them unless, you actively enjoy that type of stuff. And then there was the online, which obviously the netcode had its own problems, which I won't bother getting into, but there just wasn't a lot to do. And for me personally, I've said it before that I enjoy, single player, like, in fighting games. But what I enjoy the most is I like to just go onto the Versus CPU and just fight the computer. I like to pick my own stages, my own costumes, my own opponents, and I like to just fight the computer and just kind of like go around the roster and just explore the game and just play it. It's my, like, as people enjoy playing online, I just enjoy playing it against the computer. And in Street Fighter 5, when that game came out, I couldn't do that. There was no Versus CPU in that game. If you went onto Versus, it was just player 2 Versus, so you needed an actual, like, human being on another controller. Like, that was the only way you could fight somebody in Versus. That was the only option you got. And at the time, I didn't really have anybody else that I knew that, like, actually enjoyed fighting games as much as I did or like to play them. So I had no real options. I would later find out that the only way to actually fight the computer in a way that simulated Versus CPU was to go into training mode. It was just pathetic. Like, I've never in my life felt like fighting games were more poverty than that moment. Like, that was the lowest I've ever felt like while playing a fighting game, of just having to resort to using training mode. Because basically what you did was you would change the settings so that when you KO'd the opponent, when you emptied their life bar, it would come up KO, and then it would just immediately reset and you'd just be back at full health. There was no rounds, there was no outros or intros, no end game quote. It's just not, you just emptied the life bar, the KO, reset. And that's what I had to do for like the first 6 months of Street Fighter V's life. I think it wasn't even until when Urien came out in September of 2016, so I think 7 months actually. 7 months when Urien came out, they actually finally added Versus CPU. And it was just crazy. Like, it was just, I mean, everybody knows it by now, but the game just should not have launched in February in that state. And if they really felt like they had to release it at that time, they should have made it very obvious. I mean, they went over game modes. I remember they did a game modes trailer before the game came out, but it was very vague about what was actually there. It just said Versus, didn't say Versus CPU. It said survival. Didn't really go over the issues that survival had at that time and what was really wrong with it. And it just wasn't clear. And I remember, like, not a lot of people knew how bad it was, because I remember when people got early copies of Street Fighter 5 and it actually started coming out, like, people were saying, who got early copies, like, there is nothing to do in this game. Like, I've done the character stories, I did them in 2 hours, which I also did them very quickly, because as I said, some were very short. Like, I've done the character stories, I've done a couple of the trials, the survival mode is awful, like, the online, obviously not many people online, but like, there's just nothing to really do. And people didn't, like, believe it at first. I remember I was on the Shoryuken forums at the time, SRK for short, and I actually made a thread on there at the time. I don't know if you can still find that thread, but I made a thread basically going, like, it's actually pretty shocking, like, how little there is to do in the game, like, how few game modes there are, and I got ripped to shreds for it. Like, I had everybody on that forum, like, clowning on me, laughing at me, telling me to go somewhere else, that SRK wasn't the place for me, because, real fighting game players don't care about game modes. And then it was one of the most complained about aspects of that game when it came out. And it's that thing, like, people didn't believe it. People didn't know how poorly that game was in. I mean, we didn't get the shop until March when Alex came out, but you could still unlock the story costumes by doing the character stories. So you unlocked costumes that you just couldn't buy. And like, it was just insane. Like, I've never in my life, not even like beyond fighting games, just games in general, I've never seen just such a colossal failure. And I think it's easy now to kind of like think about Street Fighter 5, and like that stuff is just so distant in the past now. Even there's parts that I'm sure, like, back then that even I forget about how bad it really was. But the really, like, some parts still stand out. But it was just not a fun time. I remember sitting there and, like, I'd done all the character stories. I'd done a bit of survival and I just really didn't want to do anymore. I'm not that big of a fan of trials, and it was just like, I just sat there and I was like, what is there actually to do in this game? Like, what do I do now? Like, the one thing I like to do versus CPU, I can't even really do properly. So it's like what is there? Like, and I think it wasn't even that long after that I ended up playing another game because there was just no reason to really play Street Fighter 5. And the most I did was go on training mode. I'm not a big online player, and even I tried online at the time because I was just that desperate to just do something. But again, I'm not an online player that much, so I didn't stick with it for long. But I definitely think that's something Street Fighter 6 desperately needs to make up for. I definitely think that's something that Capcom need to focus on for Street Fighter 6. And I'm sure they do. I'm sure they know that's a very important thing to people. I know they added arcade mode, but to be honest, arcade mode is I never really felt like it was that much of an improvement. It didn't fix the problem with Street Fighter 5 that much. Obviously there were other things to do by that point. You know, they added the cinematic story mode for those that cared, but there just still wasn't a lot. And the thing with arcade mode, that to me it just felt like more of the same. It felt like survival mode, but like obviously your health carried over, and it was like. The arcade mode was nice, but I think at that point it was just too little too late for me. But I think more than anything, they need a mode that just keeps people invested, keeps people coming back to the game, keeps people wanting to invest in it. For as much as they put into the game, they get as many rewards out of it. And people have said in the past that a World Tour mode for Street Fighter 6 would be really good. I think it would be cool. I would be definitely down for it. But I think no matter what the mode is, they just need a mode that just keeps people invested and just gives them something to do. So it's like when you do the story mode, however the story mode in Street Fighter 6 is done, there just needs to be something that keeps people wanting to come back. And I think that's something Street Fighter 5, even now, I think really lacks, because unless you actively enjoy playing Street Fighter 5, even now, there's not a lot to really, like, once you do the character stories, I honestly think character stories is really, like, the main thing to do in Street Fighter 5. I know a lot of people will probably disagree with that or not really care, but like, I think once you do the character stories in Street Fighter 5, like, unless you're actively like really enjoying the game and just want to keep playing it, there's just not much reason to keep going. And I definitely think they need something that just keeps you coming back, something that always constantly kind of, I would say, keeps your attention, but not in like a games as a service type way, but in a way that just like, I mean, like I said, for all the time you put into it, you get twice the rewards, you know, like costume, skins, just something, but not something where it's like predatory or, you know, requires a large amount of grinding. Just something where it's like, I play this mode, I rank up my characters, the characters I play. If I play as Ken in this mode and I get him to level 5, I get rewards that are very, you know, I get rewards for Ken that are very kind of, even if they're cosmetic, but they're rewards that feel rewarding, basically. I want to put the time in to get this reward for Ken, but in a way that actually feels fun. And I'm kind of rambling a bit, but I just feel like Street Fighter 6 needs that type of mode. It needs that mode that just wants people coming back for more. But most importantly, it just needs something to just do, you know. And I kind of hope Capcom know that. I think that an arcade mode is just isn't quite right for that, unless they seriously revamp how a arcade mode works, which I kind of doubt they will. But yeah, it's something that I think Street Fighter 6 should focus on a lot, but we'll see how it goes. For number 3, I'm going with something that I think some people will agree with me on, but I think for the most part it really depends on how you feel about certain characters or games, and that is, I want Street Fighter 6 to have a balanced mix of returning characters. So again, I'm just going to be upfront about it. I'm not a big fan of Street Fighter 2. And don't get me wrong, it's a great game and it's unparalleled in terms of what it did for the genre, but it just never left really that much of an impact on me, and I was never that big of a fan of its cast. And I get it, like I do get it. I get why so many Street Fighter 2 characters keep coming back, because in truth they are needed. And with Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter 5, more so Street Fighter 4, I understand why so many Street Fighter 2 characters came back, not only in the base roster, but eventually all of them came back by Super Street Fighter 4. But with Street Fighter 5, that game launched with a base roster of 16 characters, and 16 characters isn't a lot. I could go into that in and of itself, but when you break down those 16 characters in terms of which characters were in it and which games those characters debuted from, you realise that 8 of those characters were from Street Fighter 2, and that's literally half the base roster being made up of characters from one specific game. And I don't care what the game is, that's just too many. And like I said, I know Street Fighter 2 is important, and I know those characters mean a lot to a lot of people, but I just want more of an even balance. I just want more games represented earlier on. It's frankly insane to me, and this kind of goes into the first topic about Street Fighter 3, and you're never going past it, is the fact that since Street Fighter 3, we've never had a Street Fighter 3 character in the base game of a Street Fighter game since Street Fighter 3. Street Fighter 4 didn't have any, and again, I can understand why, because Street Fighter 4, for all intents and purposes, was a sort of soft reboot of the series. But for 5, there was no excuse. And the fact Street Fighter 5 didn't launch with any was just ridiculous. But we can get 8 Street Fighter 2 characters, and it's unfair to me, if anything. And again, a lot of this depends on, how you personally feel about them. Like I said earlier, if you love Street Fighter 2 characters, if you think World Warrior or Super Turbo is the best fighting game ever, cool for you. I'm glad you're happy. But for me, for somebody who, really got into the series because of Third Strike and has an attachment to those characters a lot more than I do the World Warriors, it's a big bummer, and it really disappoints me when I see more Street Fighter 2 characters getting, because I always think, like, you had your chance, like when Honda comes back, or when Blanc or Zangief or Dhalsim come back, and I'm like, you know what, you were just in the last game, but it's like, then I look at characters, like, obviously at the time, like now, characters like Alex and Urien have come back, but when I look at, like, back then, it was sort of like where's Alex, where's Urien, where's, Gil, and it's like, but now it's like, now those characters come back, and that's great. But now I look at other characters like, where's Sean, where's Aura, where's Necro, Q, other characters. I mean, even characters from Street Fighter 4 that didn't come back. Like, where's Gouken, where's Hakan, where's Abel, characters that, like, maybe weren't the most popular or weren't the most developed, but, with another appearance, they can have another chance. It's like, they just keep doing Street Fighter 2 characters, and it's just getting old. And I really just want them to mix it up better. I'm not saying have every character be from Street Fighter 3. That's not what I'm saying at all. I wouldn't want every character to be from Alpha either, and I love Alpha, and I love Street Fighter Alpha's cast, but it's like, just balance it better. Like, if you have a roster of 16 characters, just balance it a bit better. I mean, I wouldn't want 16 characters in the base roster, but just balance it a bit better, like, just have it more even. Like, have your Street Fighter 2 characters, and I will even allow you to have more Street Fighter 2 characters than other characters, but just don't make them take up so much room. 50% of a base roster being from one game is just ridiculous. Again, I don't care what the game is. I don't care if it's a game I love. I don't care if it's a game I hate. It's not fair to the other characters and the other fans of those characters and the other fans of those games that they keep getting left out. And yeah, I really just... Again, I'm not going to go into the details of, like, which characters I would swap out for other characters. That's not really important, but what's important is that I really want Capcom to just do a better job balancing the base roster. Just one Street Fighter 3 character in the base roster of Street Fighter 6. That's literally all I want. I just want one. Like, give me one and I'll shut up for a bit. But I preferably would want a lot more than that. I would want it to be more balanced. I would want every Street Fighter game to at least be kind of, held to a similar level as Street Fighter 2. Maybe not the same level. Like I said, Street Fighter 2 could have a little more characters than other games, but, like, it shouldn't be such a wide majority. I mean, I think the Street Fighter Alpha games in Street Fighter 5, they only had, like, 4 characters compared to, like, 8. It's just not fair to me, I think an even balance would be, like, say one game gets 4 characters, Street Fighter 2 max should get, like, 6. But that's kind of just going into a more rambly off-topic thing. But yeah, basically, that's really what I want. I just want them to balance it better. Like, have your Street Fighter 2 characters by all means, but just make sure you don't forget the other games in the series, because there are a lot of other games now. There's a ton of characters you can pull from other games. Some that haven't gotten the shot, some that deserve the shot more than others. Again, that's kind of subjective, so I'm not really going to go too far into that. But yeah, it's just, there's a lot you could do than just Street Fighter 2 characters, and I really want them to kind of move more towards, like, move away from Street Fighter 2 and just kind of start embracing the whole series a bit more, which actually leads into my next topic. Hey everybody, post-production Scotia here. As you can no doubt tell, I'm currently editing the video that you're watching, but I just wanted to jump in here for a quick second just to kind of explain a bit more about what I was talking about before we move on to the next point. And I realised while editing this video that throughout this last part that you've just watched, I was kind of more going on about, like, mostly just Street Fighter 3 in terms of, like, characters that I want to see back more in favour of Street Fighter 2 characters showing up. And I just want to clarify, while Street Fighter 3 is the most important Street Fighter game to me personally, and while yes, I would rather see more Street Fighter 3 characters back than other games, I am talking in general the whole series. I'm not just specifically going on about Street Fighter 3 characters. I would like more Street Fighter characters from other games in general, in favour of, the same Street Fighter 2 characters kind of like getting guaranteed slots every game. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there, because I was thinking to myself, I am kind of hyper focusing on Street Fighter 3 a lot. And I do mean the whole series. I do want to see more Street Fighter 4 characters, Street Fighter 5 characters eventually, because obviously they'll be returning characters should they come back in 6. I just want to see a whole variety of characters, basically, not just the same 8 or 12 Street Fighter 2 characters. So that's just what that's just what I wanted to throw in here quickly before we move on. So hopefully that makes sense. So back to the video. For the last one, I'm going with something that honestly might be a bit controversial, or for some people might not be something they really get, but I'm going to try and explain it as best as I can. But I don't want them to rely too much on the series legacy. So by this, I mean that with Street Fighter 5, in general, I feel like it catered really hard to the overall legacy of the Street Fighter series. And while I don't think that's a bad thing, I think to the extent that they did it in Street Fighter 5, it was a bit much. And by this I mean that when I look at Street Fighter 5 now in 2022, even before then, I see a game with no real clear identity. I see a game that just takes things from multiple Street Fighter games and doesn't really do anything new with them, doesn't reinvent them in a way that is unique to Street Fighter 5. It just takes them and just goes, hey, here's this thing from Alpha or this thing from 2. And again, it's cool because you get that nostalgic, like, oh, I remember that. But I feel like it comes at the cost of Street Fighter 5 feeling like its own thing. And I feel this the most when I see characters fighting in their Alpha costumes while fighting on Street Fighter 2 stages, while remixes of Street Fighter 3 things play in the background, and it's like, it feels like this weird amalgamation of the series, but at the cost of it doesn't feel like I'm playing Street Fighter 5. It feels like I'm playing Street Fighter 2 Alpha 3.4 or whatever. And it's just a real shame, because I feel like Street Fighter 5 did have its own identity when it came out. I feel like when the game came out, it had its own stages, it had its own costumes. When I look at Dhalsim's base costume in Street Fighter 5, that's Street Fighter 5 to me, because that's the only time Dhalsim had that look. But now I have a costume that I can use at any time that just gets rid of that design and just puts him back to a Street Fighter 2 design. And it's like, it feels cheap to me. It just feels like just constantly going back to the older games, to the good old days, so to speak, instead of just moving the franchise forward, moving the series forward. I'm so tired of seeing Ryu's stage, from Street Fighter 2. I'm so tired of Street Fighter 2 stages in general, or Alpha stages, or stuff like that. And it's like, Street Fighter 5 is a celebration of the series, but at the cost of having its own identity, and I really don't want the same for Street Fighter 6. I think already we're at quite a big kind of leap forward with that, because already Street Fighter 6 looks very different to the rest of the series. Almost every character is going to get some form of a redesign. Maybe not complete redesigns, but something along the lines of something that just is a bit different. I mean, a character like Ryu getting a redesign is already a really good sign of that. So I'm not exactly optimistic, but I am I am hopeful that Capcom are kind of moving away from that. But I don't mind nostalgia costumes, I don't mind nostalgia stages, I just don't want so much of it. And a big part of this when I really felt this was the arcade mode for Street Fighter 5 that came with the Arcade Edition update, which is when I pretty much pinpoint the exact moment that Street Fighter 5 kind of lost its identity, because everything in that game just kind of went towards 30th anniversary, because that was around the time when the 30th anniversary was happening. Everything just became about the 30th anniversary. It became about the other games in the series. You had the arcade ladders that reflected each game in the series, and it's cool, and I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the artwork, but it's when I played the arcade modes in Street Fighter 5, when I did the Street Fighter 3 arcade ladder route, or the Street Fighter Alpha arcade ladder route, it didn't make me feel glad that I was playing Street Fighter 5. It just made me want to play Alpha and 3. And the same with the other games. And I just didn't appreciate them trying to ape the legacy of the series, trying to ape the experiences of other games, because when at that time the 30th anniversary collection was readily available. So if I wanted to play those games, I could just stop playing Street Fighter 5 and go play them. And that's still a thing now. Like, I don't have to play, like, I don't want to feel like I'm playing other Street Fighter games in a new Street Fighter game. I want to, like, because I can just go and play them. Like, if I want to play on Sakura's stage with the house and her brother in the front window, I can just play Alpha 2. Like, that's readily available for me now. And I just don't want the series to keep, looking back. Like, I don't mind looking back when done correctly or done in small doses, because it's nice to be nostalgic. But when you're constantly nostalgic and you're constantly kind of going like, hey, remember this thing? Like, remember how Guile used to look? Or remember how this stage used to look? Or remember this and that? You're just like, enough is enough. Just let Street Fighter 5 be its own thing. Let Street Fighter 5 breathe. And I never got that, and it just got less and less and got worse and worse. It was like, when you had the fighting chance added to the game, it got even worse because there were just even more costumes from other games that just kept being added, and it's like, it's cool and it's a nod and I appreciate it, but it's like when you just get so many, when like Bison has like 3 nostalgia skins or however many he had by the time that game finished, it was just like, come on, like, I don't know. It's just something I've felt for a while now with Street Fighter 5. I don't know if other people feel the same way, but it's definitely been a big issue of mine and something that I've kind of held against the game for quite a long time now, in terms of like, yeah, like, I just don't feel like Street Fighter 5 has its own identity anymore, It just feels like a game that just takes from other games in the series and just does nothing with them. It just regurgitates them and be like, hey, remember this? Blah, like, do you want to see Street Fighter 2 again? Blah, and it's just a shame. And I really hope Street Fighter 6 doesn't do that. I'm hopeful. I'm feeling good that I won't. Like, already the game looks different. Ryu has a redesign, which is a huge thing. First redesign he's ever had for a mainline Street Fighter game. So yeah, hopefully that's a thing I don't have to worry about. But that's the last thing I'm kind of like worried about that I really don't want them to do. But yeah, that's kind of it, really. So those are 4 things that I feel like Street Fighter 6 must do. Hopefully people can agree or kind of see where I'm coming from with most, if not all of these. I'm not really feel like I'm asking for too much, to be honest. I feel like most of my kind of lists or demands, if you would use that term, I think most of them are reasonable. I think the stuff that either Capcom knows about in terms of kind of like where they're heading already, by the looks of it, or stuff that people have been asking for since Street Fighter 5 came out. So I'm hopeful that most of them can be met. I think if anything, if I had to pick 2 that I really, really wanted to kind of like happen the most, it would definitely be the first 2, Street Fighter 3 being passed in the timeline and, having basic game modes day one. Those are definitely 2 things that if I don't get like one or both of those in Street Fighter 6, I'm going to be very, very disappointed. But I'm confident we'll get at least most of the things I've listed today. But we'll see how it goes. I mean, Street Fighter 6, we still know very little about it, but hopefully we get more info soon. Summer Games Fest is coming up very soon, June 9th, so hopefully we'll find out more then. Hopefully it'll show up then, and then we can get a teaser or some form of like an announcement for kind of more of a deeper, in-depth look at the game via a normal Capcom seasonal showcase like they were doing for Season 5, which they, even Capcom themselves were very proud of and they did a very good job on. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But yeah, this is the last Street Fighter 6 video that I'm going to do for a while, because there's honestly, at the moment, there's honestly not a lot I can really think of talking about. I've kind of talked about a lot of what I want to see, characters, and now this in terms of the game itself. So yeah, I'm still very much excited for Street Fighter 6, obviously, as you can no doubt obviously tell. But we'll have to see how things go, Still a long time, probably, before we end up playing this game. I think at least a year. But yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm very excited to just cover this game, because like I said earlier in the video, this was really the first game that, Street Fighter 5 was the first game that I really kind of, got into in terms of Street Fighter being there day one. And obviously back then, didn't have a YouTube channel, was very kind of low-key. Back then, I was just a very regular forum member on other places like NeoGAF and SRK and stuff like that. But now that I have this channel, I'm very interested in kind of, going out there and just talking about the game and giving kind of my views on things, my takes on different aspects of the game. Because I feel like, I don't want to, big myself up or anything, but I feel like my opinions and my takes are very unique. I don't think a lot of people think about or feel about the things about the series like I do. I have very specific tastes when it comes to things. I was going to have a joke point in here at the end of here about, the the most important point of all, and I was just going to be like, have Sean in the game, because Sean is a character I like a lot. Again, if you couldn't tell. But I got rid of it because it just was too jokey, I guess. I didn't really feel like there was a point to it in terms of just, like, you know, outside of just being funny. But, yeah, I am interested to just kind of, like, you know, get the opinion out there of somebody who, honestly, more than anything, is just a big fan of Street Fighter 3. You know, is just a fan of that game. Feels like it deserves more recognition in terms of where the series is at today. Not saying it doesn't get recognition, but I think it always could use a bit more. So yeah, I am very excited and looking forward to all that. Obviously going to be covering the game a lot once we start hearing more and getting more frequent announcements. As I said when the game got revealed, very, very bummed that they kind of just gave us that 40-second trailer and then just dipped. Kind of left me a bit in the lurch a bit, kind of like, oh, I don't even know what to do now. But I feel like I've covered the gap well enough as best as I can. But yeah, like I said, it's going to be very fun. I'm very much looking forward to it. I hope you guys are all looking forward to it. That's all for today. I really just wanted... This was really... I mean, like I said, I think I've said before, like, I had one more video planned for Street Fighter 6, and this was that video. I always wanted to go over, like, the game itself, what I wanted to see in it. So, yeah, that's it for now. There's nothing else really for me to talk about. Like I said, we'll come back to Street Fighter 6 again when we actually see the game. I'll go very much in depth of whatever they show, whether it's a trailer at Summer Games Fest or a State of Play, or just a Capcom seasonal showcase, whatever it is. I'm going to go over it. I'm going to just do what I do best and just talk about the story, I guess. But like I said, cross that bridge when we get to it. Thank you so much for the support as always. That's it for now. I shall see you later. Goodbye.
We await your return, warrior.